Steve Harvey was about to deliver what he thought would be an ordinary joke when he noticed something that made him stop mid-sentence. An 82-year-old woman in the contestants' seating area was clutching a worn envelope to her chest like it was the only thing keeping her alive. What happened next would become the most powerful moment in Family Feud history. One that proved sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you're running out of time. It was Thursday, February 8th, 2024, at the Family Feud studio in Atlanta. The day started like any other taping day. Two families had arrived early. The energy was electric, and the audience was settling into their seats with that familiar anticipation. But backstage, something was happening that no one in the studio audience knew about. Eleanor Hartwell, 82 years old, sat in a contestant holding area with her 3 adult children. She was wearing her favorite dress, a soft lavender color that her late husband had always said brought out her eyes. That was 43 years ago. He'd been gone for nearly 2 decades now, but Eleanor still wore colors he would have loved. "Mom, are you sure about this?" Her youngest daughter, Catherine, asked for the 3rd time that morning. "We could still back out. The show doesn't start for another hour." Eleanor smiled and squeezed Catherine's hand. Her hands were thin now, almost translucent in the studio lighting. You could see the blue veins mapping out a life's worth of holding, working, loving, and letting go. "Sweetheart, I've been waiting my whole life to do this," Eleanor said quietly. "I'm not backing out now." What Eleanor's children didn't know, what only her doctor knew, was that this would likely be Eleanor's last adventure. The cancer diagnosis had come 3 months ago. Stage 4, pancreatic. The doctors had given her until summer if she was lucky. Eleanor had made a decision. She wouldn't spend her remaining months in hospital rooms. She would spend them living. She watched Family Feud for 37 years. Never missed an episode. When Steve Harvey took over as host, she'd become an even more devoted viewer. There was something about the way he treated people, the way he saw them. Eleanor had written into the show's casting department without telling anyone. She'd written about her life, her husband, her children, her faith. She'd written about how game shows had been her companion through widowhood, through grandchildren, through quiet afternoons alone. The casting director had called 2 weeks later. "Mrs. Hartwell, we'd love to have you and your family on Family Feud." Eleanor had cried for an hour straight after hanging up the phone. Now, sitting backstage, she felt her chest tighten, not from emotion, but from the tumors pressing against her ribs. She took a breath. "Just one more day," she told her body. "Let me have just one more good day." When Eleanor's family, Catherine, her son Michael, and his wife Susan, walked out onto the Family Feud stage, the audience applauded warmly. Eleanor moved slowly, deliberately, but with grace. Steve Harvey's trained, I caught her immediately. He always noticed the older contestants. They reminded him of his own mother. There was a particular dignity in the way they carried themselves, a kind of earned slowness that spoke of a life well lived. "Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for the Hartwell family," Steve announced as they took their positions. During the family introductions, Steve knelt down slightly to be at Eleanor's eye level. She was the last to introduce herself. "Mrs. Eleanor Hartwell," Steve read from his card. "Tell us, Eleanor, and I have a feeling there's a story here. What brings you and your family to Family Feud today?" Eleanor's eyes glistened slightly as she looked at Steve. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "Mr. Harvey, I've been watching your show for almost 4 decades. I watched it when I was raising my children. I watched it with my husband before he passed. I watched it through happy times and lonely times." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "And I always thought, I wonder what it would feel like to be on that stage. So I asked, and here we are." The audience applauded. Steve smiled warmly. He had no idea he was looking into the eyes of a woman, saying goodbye. "Well, we're honored to have you here, Eleanor," Steve said. "I have a feeling you're going to be special." The first 2 rounds were pleasant. Eleanor's family did well enough. Not spectacular, but solid. Michael was quick with answers. Catherine had good intuition. Susan kept the family's spirits high with encouraging words. But Eleanor, when she answered, brought something different to the stage. A kind of quiet wisdom. When asked to name something people do to feel better, Eleanor answered, sit with someone. The answer wasn't on the board, but Steve paused before moving on. That's beautiful, Eleanor, he said, and he meant it. It was during the third round, the final lightning round before Fast Money, that everything changed. The question was simple. Name something you want to do before it's too late. Michael had just answered, travel to Europe. The audience chuckled. Standard answer. Then it was Eleanor's turn at the podium. She stood there for longer than usual, looking down at her hands gripping the podium edges. Steve, already preparing to deliver one of his signature reactions, noticed her pause. Eleanor, he prompted gently. Something you want to do before it's too late? When Eleanor looked up at Steve, he saw something in her expression that made his entire body go still. It wasn't sadness. It was something deeper. It was finality. Tell someone the truth, Eleanor said quietly. About why I'm really here. The studio audience had been chuckling moments before. Now he set down his cards slowly. Eleanor, he said, walking closer to her. What truth is that? Eleanor glanced back at her children, who were suddenly very still. Catherine's face had gone pale. She knew what her mother was about to do. Mr. Harvey, Eleanor began, her voice gaining strength even as it remained quiet. I'm here because I'm running out of time. I have stage 4 pancreatic cancer. My doctor gave me maybe 6 months. I didn't tell my children I was coming on this show. I just needed to do something that felt alive. Something that felt like I was still here, still present, still myself. The studio fell silent except for the sound of some audience members gasping. Steve Harvey stood frozen for a moment. Then he slowly walked around the podium to Eleanor. He didn't speak. He simply took her hand. Does anyone else know about this? He asked. My daughter Catherine and my doctor, Eleanor said. Michael and Susan, I was going to tell them after today. I was going to tell them all today. Catherine had tears streaming down her face. Michael looked confused, then devastated, all in the span of seconds. Steve Harvey, host of a game show, with millions of viewers watching, made a decision in that moment that would defy every protocol, every producer's expectation, every rule of television. He pressed his microphone button. Stop the music, he called out to the production booth. Cut the clock. Stop everything. The upbeat Family Feud music cut off abruptly. The ambient noise of the studio died down. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve said, his voice carrying through the silent studio, I need to pause this game for a moment, because something more important than Family Feud is happening right here on this stage. Steve guided Eleanor to the center of the stage. He didn't let go of her hand. He looked at her children. Can you come up here? He asked Michael and Catherine gently. They walked up onto the stage, bewildered and emotional. Susan followed behind Michael. Eleanor, Steve said, now speaking to her with the full weight of his attention, I want to know everything. Not as a game show host, as someone who wants to hear your story. How long have you known? Eleanor took a shaky breath. 3 months. December 15th. That's when they told me. And you've been carrying this alone? Not alone, Eleanor said, looking at her children. I just didn't tell them how serious it is. I think I was trying to protect them. Or maybe I was trying to protect myself by not saying it out loud to them yet. Steve pulled up a chair and sat down beside Eleanor, right there on the stage. He gestured for her children to sit as well. Tell me about your husband, Steve said. The one you watched the show with. Eleanor's eyes immediately filled with tears, but she smiled. His name was Robert. We were married for 56 years. He died 23 years ago. But I still do things I know he would have loved. I wear the colors he loved. I eat at the restaurants he loved. I think about what he would have said about things. She wiped her eyes. I think I've been trying to be enough for both of us. To keep him alive by living enough for 2 people. The studio audience was completely silent now. Even the camera operators were struggling to maintain focus through their tears. And your children? Steve asked. Tell me about them. As Eleanor talked about Michael's career, about Catherine's art, about Susan's kindness, something shifted in the studio. It was no longer about the game. It was about witnessing a life. It was about seeing someone in their fullness, not just on a game show stage, but in their humanity. Eleanor, Steve said finally, I have to ask you something. What is it that you're afraid of? Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. I'm afraid, she said slowly, that I'll be forgotten. That when I'm gone, It will be like I was never really here. That the things I did, the people I loved, the way I tried to live, it will all just disappear. Steve felt his throat tighten. He'd been in entertainment for over 30 years. He'd seen countless emotional moments. But this was different. This was about legacy, about meaning, about the oldest human fear. Eleanor, Steve said, his voice thick, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You're not going to be forgotten. Steve stood up slowly, still holding Eleanor's hand. He addressed the studio audience directly. How many of you have someone in your life who's afraid of being forgotten? He asked. Nearly every hand in the studio went up. That's what I thought, Steve said. Eleanor, you walked onto this stage 3 hours ago, thinking you were going to play a game show. But what you've done is remind every single person in this room, and every single person who watches this when it airs, that showing up, being honest, being vulnerable, that's how we stay alive in people's hearts. Steve turned to the production team. I need everyone watching to understand something, he said, speaking to the cameras now. I don't know how many more episodes Eleanor will be able to watch with us. But I know this, we're going to make sure her story is heard. Not just as a game show moment, but as a testament to a life well lived. Steve looked back at Eleanor. Eleanor Hartwell, I'm going to make you a promise. When this episode airs, your name is going to be known. Not because of points on a board or money won, but because you had the courage to tell the truth about what it means to be human, to be afraid, and to keep showing up anyway. Steve called over the production assistant and whispered something to her. She nodded and ran backstage. Eleanor, I want to do something, Steve said, but I need your permission. What is it? Eleanor asked. I want to create something in your name. The Eleanor Hartwell Legacy Project. It will be a digital archive where people can share stories about loved ones they're afraid of losing. A place where people can say, this person mattered. This person was here. I don't want them forgotten. Would that be okay with you? Eleanor nodded, unable to speak through her tears. The production assistant returned with Eleanor's application form, the one she'd filled out weeks ago when she applied for the show. It was worn and coffee-stained, filled with her handwriting. Read it, Steve said gently, handing it to Eleanor. Eleanor looked down at her own words written weeks ago. My name is Eleanor Hartwell. I am 82 years old and a widow. I've watched Family Feud for decades. It has been my companion through joy and grief. If I could be on the show, I would want everyone to know that even when we're alone, we're not forgotten. That our lives matter. That showing up every day, even when we're scared, even when we're tired, even when we're facing things we don't understand, that's enough. That's beautiful. I want to tell people that they matter. Eleanor held the paper to her chest. Michael put his arm around her. Catherine held her hand. Susan stood nearby, crying silently. That's your legacy right there, Steve said softly. That's who you are, Eleanor. Not a game show contestant. A person who matters. Steve walked off stage for just a moment. When he returned, he was holding something that made Eleanor's breath catch. It was a leather-bound journal, beautiful and pristine. On the front, embossed in gold lettering, were the words, My story matters. This is yours, Steve said, handing it to Eleanor. I want you to keep writing. Every day, even if it's just one sentence, I want you to write down what you did that day, who you loved, what made you feel alive. And after you're gone, if you want, we're going to publish it. So people know. So people remember. So no one ever forgets that Eleanor Hartwell was here. Eleanor opened the journal with trembling hands. On the first page, Steve had written in his own handwriting, Dear Eleanor, thank you for reminding me why I do this. Thank you for being brave enough to tell the truth. Your life matters. You matter. Keep writing. Keep living. Keep showing us what courage looks like. Steve. The studio erupted in applause that lasted almost 5 minutes. It wasn't the usual game show applause. It was something deeper. It was respect. It was love. It was the sound of people recognizing another person's humanity. When the episode aired 8 weeks later, it became the most shared Family Feud episode in internet history. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed over 150 million times. But the real impact came in the comments, the messages, the stories that flooded in from viewers around the world. I lost my mother 6 months ago, and I've been devastated about being forgotten. Watching Eleanor tonight, I realized my mother's legacy isn't something I have to keep alone. I'm starting to talk about her. Thank you. I'm 79, and I've been struggling with the idea that my life doesn't matter because I don't have a big career or fame. Eleanor's words made me understand that just by loving people, just by showing up, just by being here, that's enough. I'm a hospice nurse, and I've played this episode for every patient and their family. It's teaching us how to talk about what we're afraid of. The Eleanor Hartwell Legacy Project launched 3 weeks later. Within a month, over 50,000 people had created profiles, sharing stories about loved ones they didn't want forgotten. But the most powerful moment came 4 months after the episode aired. Eleanor passed away on a Sunday morning in June, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. In her hands was the leather journal Steve had given her, now filled with nearly 200 entries. The final entry, dated just 2 days before her death, read, "Today I watched the episode again with my family gathered around. Catherine was laughing at something I said. Michael was holding his daughter, my granddaughter, and I realized that I'm not afraid anymore. Not of being forgotten, because my children will remember. My grandchildren will remember. The people I loved will carry me forward. But more than that, thousands of people I've never met know my name now. They know I was here, and in a way I never expected, I'm still here too, in their hearts, in their stories, in the conversations my episode started about what it means to matter. Steve Harvey was right. My life does matter. It always has. I just needed permission to believe it. I'm grateful for that permission. I'm grateful for Family Feud. I'm grateful for every single day I got to be alive." Eleanor. When Eleanor's family released this final entry, it sparked a movement. The hashtag #MyStoryMatters began trending worldwide. People shared photos with their elderly loved ones. They recorded videos of grandparents telling their stories. They called parents they hadn't spoken to in months just to say, "You matter. Your life matters." Steve Harvey wept openly on his morning radio show when he heard about Eleanor's passing. He read her final journal entry on air, and by the end, the entire broadcast team was crying. Eleanor Hartwell taught us something we desperately need to remember, Steve said into the microphone. Every single one of us matters. Every single one of us has a story worth telling. Every single one of us deserves to know, before it's too late, that we were important, that we were seen, that we were loved. 6 months after Eleanor's death, Steve Harvey established the Eleanor Hartwell Foundation, dedicated to helping people create and preserve their life stories before it's too late. The foundation provides resources, mentorship, and platforms for people to document their lives, their love, their legacies. The foundation's motto, taken directly from Eleanor's words, is simple but profound. Show up. Tell the truth. Be remembered. To date, Eleanor's fear of being forgotten became the seed of a movement that helped thousands of people recognize that they don't have to wait until they're dying to declare that their lives matter. They don't have to get cancer to understand that being present, being honest, being themselves is enough. The journal Steve gave Eleanor sits in a museum now, but Eleanor's legacy lives in every person who watched that episode and decided to call someone they love. Every person who started writing their story. Every person who looked another person in the eye and said, "You matter. I don't want to forget you." Eleanor Hartwell was 82 years old when she appeared on Family Feud. She lived for 4 more months after that episode aired. But in those 4 months, she wasn't afraid anymore. She was seen. She was heard. She was remembered. And even now, years after her passing, every time someone uses the hashtag #MyStoryMatters, Eleanor is still here, still being remembered, still reminding us all that the things that matter most aren't the things we accomplish. They're the love we leave behind. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is tell someone we love them before it's too late. Sometimes the most powerful television moment isn't a game show at all. Sometimes it's just a woman being brave enough to say, "I'm here. I was here. Please remember." And if you're watching this now, and you have someone you love, someone whose story matters to you, call them. Don't wait. Tell them they matter. Let them know you don't want to forget them. Because that's what Eleanor taught us. That showing up, being honest, and making sure people know they matter, that's the most important game we'll ever play. Subscribe and share this story. Make sure Eleanor Hartwell is never forgotten. Because her courage changed us all.